Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jack the Lad podcast. If you haven't subscribed already, get clicking. What are you doing? On today's episode, we've got on Marcie Detroit. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marcie Detroit, or Marcella Detroit Land Frisbee for full, but Marcie Detroit. I'm a pole dancer and aerial arts teacher and performer. I've been doing this for, I'd say, most of my life because my mum got me into it. But yeah.
So, when you say your mum got you into it, at what age did you start doing it, and what was the first thing that you learned?
So I remember she put a pole up in the lounge when I was about 7 or 8. And it was because she was doing classes of herself, and they turned around and said to her that she should be an assistant of her own in the classes. And she was like, "Nah, I want to be my own instructor." So she very ballsy move, but she just set up a pole in the lounge and started teaching all of her close friends. And once it started getting a bit bigger, she started charging the friends and stuff, and it became like a little club that she had. And I remember I would always be training in the day with her, and we'd learn off DVDs. And I remember the ladies, I always still go back when I'm teaching my ladies on from the DVD of how to do like a simple sun wheel move. And we'd spend all day like learning off these DVDs. And then in the evening, I remember one time she shouted upstairs at me because I would never be allowed downstairs when she was teaching. I'd always have to stay upstairs. And she shouted upstairs to me. She was like, "Oh, come downstairs, come downstairs." And I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" And she put my little bit of music that I'd been practicing too, and she made me do a little like demo in front of the ladies of what I could do. And I remember like thinking to myself, like, this is what I want to do. I want to teach this. I want to perform this. Like, I was so comfortable on the pole. And when I was younger, I wasn't what I look like now at all. I was bigger, much less confident kid. And so I think pole dancing gave me a lot of the confidence that I have nowadays. Like, I'm so exuberant and in your face. I'm so much energy. But if you met me when I was younger, I'd be the one like in the corner with a DS on or something. Yeah, I wouldn't be speaking too much.
So, what does the sort of training look like for this? Like when you first started, how many hours are you putting into it, and all that sort of stuff?
Well, nowadays, because we teach classes mostly every day, we will have a day dedicated to training all of the different stuff. So, but depending on the different piece of equipment, so you'd have to be in the right studio. So, if we're training aerial, we have to be in the aerial studio because you need like a different environment basically. So, the poles, you don't need so much mattage, and you can train with barely anything on clothes wise. It's more you need less clothes on, to be honest, to grip onto the pole. And people always like, "Oh, why are pole dancers wearing so little clothing?" It's because we need to. But on the aerial side, you need to wear more clothes, and you need to put on like leggings. And um, so depending on what you're training, depends on what day you're doing it. But then in the evening, so we'll have different classes, and we'll have like a beginner's class and an intermediates class. And then after the classes, we'll do a segment of training then, and we'll work on what we've just taught in the classes. And we'll work on, well, me personally, I work on my students on a personal level. So where they are personally, I'll be like, right, next week, I need to now do a so and so move with Susan. You know what I mean? Like, I will work on each student, how they need to work. So I will base my training around how my students are developing, because I've done it all. Like, I've trained everything that I personally want to train. I've got the injuries to show for it. Now I'm kind of more just having fun with my talent per se, and giving it to other people and showing it off as
So
I've done the time training growing
yeah.
up.
So you mentioned there about injuries. Do you want to just talk us through a few of them, sort of the bigger
Oh, I'm
ones,
like
I
I'm like a
suppose?
footballer. I've got
Okay.
I've got torn ACLs, ripped hamstrings, both my knees, because I was a big kid when I was younger, and I lost the weight quite quickly from growing up, obviously, you lose your puppy fat, but not only that, because I was a bit bigger than just puppy fat, I will be honest. This helped with losing that excess fat as well. So I went from being quite big to very small very quickly. And your body struggles with that, like within your ligaments and the stuff that holds your joints together. So I have quite rubbery per se ligaments and stuff. So when I do the flexibility training, my knees love to slide out of place. So I've got very dodgy knees. My wrists are quite dodgy as well because you have to do a lot of wrist work on the pole. So my wrists are quite, you have to wear a lot of wrist. I remember I spent a year with just a wrist, I can't remember what they're called, but they like hold your muscles in really tight. And so you spend a lot of time just working on each injury. So you'll get over one injury, then you'll get another one basically, because you're constantly training on different apparatus, and each apparatus will. So the hoop and the pole are now my like favorites, because silks, I used to do a lot of silks, but I found silks were where I'd get a lot of my injuries from, because I'd struggle to keep up the training with having so many different types of things to train. I'd go up to Southampton and train on the Cordeliers. I'd train trapeze as well, and I'm hula hooper. So keeping up all of these different things is very difficult. So your body has to work towards the different things, but then you're pushing it and pulling it. And so when you're building muscle, you've got to also build your flexibility at the same time. But if you build so much muscle, you go tense and it's very hard to stretch. So then you end up ripping the muscles. And yeah, it's one of those. You're constantly trying to find a middle ground. But I'm still trying to get there. I'm near.
I can speak from experience of that. I've never been one to stretch, like ever. And yeah, I've started gymming again like a couple of months ago, and I can feel it, definitely, especially in the tendons. Like the tendons, they say, do take so much longer because they've got to sort of train themselves to like to manage with it. Because I do a lot of running and stuff like that. So yeah, my knees.
See, I hate running. Everyone's always like, "Well, you've got such good stamina. I bet you always go for run." No, I don't. I don't do any running at all. I do a little bit at the beginning of class when we're warming up, but then we'll do a bit of jogging, and then I'll be like, "Right, twisties." You know what I mean? I'm never constantly running. The most stamina stuff I do is when I'm doing long haul pole routines or silk routines, and I'll be up on the piece of apparatus for a long period of time. That's what's building my stamina. Doing running, it doesn't do too much for me. However, I say this, I have a couple of marathon runners that I teach, and they have such amazing stamina. Like they're like, give me another move, give me another move, give me another move. They can constantly be on it. So yeah, but I'm not a runner.
Yeah, that, I mean, for them as well, obviously marathons and stuff like that, that's a lot of willpower and stuff. That's a tough mental game as well, running for
it's crazy. You have to have tough mental game for a lot of different sports, like UFC. I watched that, and the mental game you have to have for that is just as much as your physical game. You can't have a rubbish mental game, and I think that's what happens a lot of time with when people compete within my sport. I don't compete personally, but when people do compete, you see them either go up or go down because they will personally struggle or personally really it will help them or make them worse in a sense, because I'm very competitive. I will compare myself to every which one and everyone else, and it's a very toxic trait to have. And within this community, definitely, because when you're looking at all the other pole dancers, you'll be comparing your body, the way you look, and all of it, and you can't do that because everyone's built differently. So everyone's going to be able to have a different sense of the way they're going to be able to work the pole, and having to get over that has taken me a long time. And so I always say to my I keep saying ladies and men I teach, my students, I always say to them, do not compare yourself. When I see them, they'd be like, oh, so and so's got the invert and they were started less time than me. I'd be like, no, you can't compare in that sense. Like, never compare yourself to anyone else in the room. Just compare yourself to what you was last week.
Yeah.
because you can only get better with comparing to yourself. If you compare yourself to whichever person in the room, you're never going to develop. And that's where you've got to have a good mental game.
Couldn't agree more. The development of one person compared to anyone, everyone who they aspire to be or look up to, whatever, they will have been in that same situation they've been in, but they're surpassed that now. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I truly do. I actually did a reel today while I was out on my run this morning, and I did a reel saying that different day, same goal. Make sure I'm better than
Yeah.
yesterday. That's it.
Oh,
And
yeah, I
it
go by
is
that
always.
mantra as well.
You've just got to make sure that you're doing what you can do every day that makes you better than what you were yesterday. You should compare yourself to your past self. That's it. That's the only comparison you should ever make. It should never be against anyone else.
Exactly. And that's why I always say to myself when I look at myself and I'm like, oh, why don't I have that 8-pack yet? Or why don't I have that so and so yet? And then all of that, I always think you was a massive girl a few years ago. Like you can't make compare to all of these massive Instagram models that have been doing Instagram and been taking photos of themselves for however many years. So I can't compare to that. I've just got to compare to who I was and what I was capable of. And so I'm very proud of where I've come. And same with how I can get over it in a sense that I love myself a lot more than I used to when I was younger. Building the confidence I have with what I do and giving what I love to other people, being able to teach what I do is giving me a lot of empowerment. Like being able to see other people develop in the way I did is very empowering. It's beautiful to see.
Yeah,
You come back from
definitely.
class sometimes and you'll be working all day long, um, hours and hours of training and stuff, and you'll come back and you'll be dead, but mentally you'll be so like you'll be thriving and like you won't be able to calm down. So it'll take you a while to calm down after class because you've got so much excitement going on in the brain. Basically, you're so powered up because like classes are very like, oh yes, go, got it, go, yeah. And when you come back from that, so you've got the whole class environment, and you come back and sit in your lounge, and you're like, oh, and you've got to really wind down after it. You can't just get straight into bed and I work a few jobs, and so when I come back, I've got to be quite quick to get into bed because I've got to get up early next day to wait. So I'm always like in the evening, I'm like, oh, so I'm there living in bed, like trying to calm down, like, and you've got to really switch the brain off. But then even then, I'm there thinking of what routines are we going to do next? Like, what's the next bit that I can work on within my floor work? What's the next new move I could give them? Like, I'm always thinking, what's the next step? And that's what I love about this job. It's not a dead end. I'm constantly like evolving.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is beautiful.
brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Have you thought about looking into any sort of sleep techniques to help you drift off more
Oh no,
easily?
I'm fine with all of that. In the end, I'm fine. It's lovely in the end because you end up having a brilliant sleep because you're so knackered and your body's so like worn out. Once your brain does turn off, you're fine. But it is that you have to give yourself like a good half an hour, 40 minutes to switch off because you are so fired up. Which is surprising because you think you'd be so knackered after doing hours and hours of being upside down on a pole. But no, yeah, I enjoy it in that sense. As well as when you're performing, you have even it's the build up before as well with performing. With classes, it's just the class, you teach the class, and then after class wind down, boom. With performing, you've got all the stigma coming before the performance, and then the performance happens, and it's like that big high, and then the high goes. Like with New Year's, we were sat in the changing rooms as the 12 o'clock hit. That's like how performers' life is. And everything's so big and thing downstairs, and we just walked away from it because we were wrecked. Like we just wanted to go, and we were like, "Oh, happy New Year to you! Yeah, let's have a drink." Like, but water, like you know what I mean. Let's go home and rest our heads. Like, and it's one of those things of being a performer. You enjoy all of that. Like we were down there and involved in it all, but then you come away from it and you're like, "We've had enough now." But it is being on that pole. You have all that big adrenaline rush, and then bang, it all goes away. And some people really struggle with that. And that's where you get people that turn to drugs and all of that because they want to feel that high constantly. But you can't, and you've got to come away, and then you've got your next performance you've got to get ready for.
So you mentioned in there, obviously, with your performing and stuff like that, and that you don't compete. Why is that?
Personally, I just always found teaching was my pathway into it because my mum runs the school. I've always found that was my pathway into what I do. I never, when I was younger, I was never that interested in doing what I do now. And I remember it was just one night my mum came in and I was about 14, 15, I think at the time. I was still quite young. Didn't do it too often, trained occasionally. But she was like, I really need someone to come and teach tonight at pool because one of my instructors can't come. And I was like, I couldn't just leave my mum empty handed. So I came and I took the class. And in the end, the instructor had to, I don't know what happened with the instructor actually. I think she had to move away or she got pregnant, either one. Um, but I ended up taking the class over. And I never was that interested. And it was hoop at first. I started teaching hoop. And I remember I fell in love with it because I had a small class, two hoops, like 4 or 5 students each class. And then we'd swap over and I'd have the other side of students because they'd be on silks and then they'd have hoop and they swap over. I remember I was very standoffish at first because I was like, it's effort teaching people. You get kicked in the face, you get smacked about, you have to constantly demo the move because people are like, oh, I can't remember, show me again. Like, it's annoying. But then you, like I said, you fall in love with it because you see the development of your students. And I have 2 of the students that I taught then when I was 14, 15. They still come to one of the classes now that I teach in one of my bigger studios. And obviously I've got them on Facebook and all of that. I've watched their progress from when I'm 23 now, from when I was 14, 15 years old to now. I've seen their whole aerial career develop. And oh my gosh, that is amazing to see. And now obviously I have younger students as well that I used to teach that were kids and now they're older, like hitting 18, 19 now, and they're amazing pole dancers. And I gave that to them when they were kids and I got them into the pole, and now they've developed their own pole careers into what they are now. And obviously they've gone different routes, and some have gone down the stripper route and some have gone down the more performing route, but each to their own. I teach all sorts of students. I had a few come back to me a few years ago that work in local strip clubs, and they come to me for the floor work content and stuff. And I do not mind them doing that. I personally, I love that because it means all of my content is getting shown everywhere, which I personally prefer instead of me going up on stage and competing because I'm so competitive. I think I'd lose my love for it because competing and then I compare again, because when you're competing you have to compare to everyone else and you're forced into that environment, whereas when I'm teaching you're taken away from that and you don't want to compete with everyone else. Everyone's on their own little journey.
Yeah, no, yeah, I see what you're saying with that. When you mentioned there as well about well, in fact, let me just bring you back to about the competing and stuff. Obviously, your mum was involved with it, and that's obviously how you got into it. How did her journey start? How did she get into it?
She just started learning classes when I was like 7 or 8, and she was very good at the classes, but they were very, there'd be loads of people on one piece of equipment. There'd be one instructor going around the room. She'd demo the move at the front and then leave them all to it. And so my mum would end up helping everyone in the class and all of that. And she was offered an assistant's role, but she didn't want that. And so she went off and did her own thing. But she's done the competing, she's done the performing, she's done as growing up, she's had, because we've had the school now about 15 years. We just had our 15-year anniversary the other week. We had a big show for it. I think during the 15 years, she's done all sorts. And during the first 5, 10 years, we did a lot of promo. And that's where I fell in love because I was so young as well. And I wasn't able to be so involved as I am now. And it's quite sad that we've come away from that because we don't do as much of that at all anymore. But we used to do like big carnivals and be on big floats, and we'd have like people hanging on the hoop and silks on these big moving floats. And I do my hula hooping alongside, but I'd always want to be the one on the hoop, like on the float. And I think that's where I'd always be like, I want to do that. I want to be the performer. And that's where the teaching, so I wasn't that fussed in the teaching. I wanted to be the girl on the stage, like showing off, like, and that's where I am now. I've gotten to the point now where I can be on stage and do exactly what I want, but it takes building a legacy to get to that legacy, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what my mum did. She built the legacy for me in a sense. Like she did all the competing, she did all the hard stuff, and she's done all the shows, and she's let me perform in all the shows, and she's let me feel what I knew I wanted to be. And so giving me like a little taster. And then she's like, right, here you are, big wide world, and throw me out into it.
So with the performances, like you said there, I take it it's like choreography, basically, like a normal dance, like normal dance.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? When
yeah,
they're like, we do
all
this and then
planned out.
transition.
All planned out. All I remember we had this one about 5 years ago called The Cruise, and we had about a year prep for this one show. And we had all the classes getting ready and doing their, like each class had their own choreographed routine. They all had outfits for it, and it each fell into like the next one. And it was like going around the world. So each one had to be like different country. And so each one had to like, so one was France and one was, like, it was very in your face, with the dramatics of it, like drag, like very draggy. But that was, I think, the biggest show that we've done with our ladies. But yeah, everything that we do is on the stage, you have to be prepared for. When I perform, I tend to stay away from choreographing my routine so much, and I have set like, because when you're performing a big set on like a New Year's Eve or like a rave stage, you're on and off stage for a while. When you've got a big choreographed show, it's much different. So each of them ladies would have known exactly what they were doing. Whereas if you're doing a big long set, you want to have like little combos like planned out. So you'll have like 3 or 4 moves in a segment, and then a different 3 or 4 moves in a segment, and then you'll move on and do different up the pole, down the pole, floor work, away from the pole. And because I do hula hoop and fan, and I'm trying to move into fire, I want to do fire hula hooping and all of that. It means I can not be so knackered all the time, so I can actually stand there and get my breath back. But you've got to be smart about how you do it. Like I was really dumb when I did New Year's Eve because I stayed up the pole for majority of the routine, just doing stuff up the pole, and I come down and I was like wrecked, like. But then I had to continue going. So you have to be quite smart about what you're doing, otherwise you end up like I was afterwards. When it hit 12, I was just in the room, like, ruins, like I couldn't even do the rest of the night. And so, but because what we do is so hard and people think it looks so easy, I think showing off is the best thing to do, though. You know what I mean? I had to show off.
100%. I believe that 100%. I think, and I don't think it obviously is just exclusive with pole dancing. I think it's anything in general. If I say to someone, I went out for a 10K today, they're just like, it's only 6 miles. I'm like, well, why didn't you go out and do it then?
Only 6 miles?
Why didn't you go out and run 6 miles? But people think it's not that far because in a car it takes you 6 minutes. I'm like, but it doesn't take that long when you're running it. I can tell you that for a fact.
Oh gosh, no, I wouldn't think that. I'd be well impressed if someone said they run 6 miles to me.
But but you get it. Like I'll speak to like this last week. We've got a competition. Me and a few of the football lads, and we're it's distance, so covering distance on foot. There's no biking, no alpine skiing or anything like that. It's just running, walking, jogging, and yeah. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and I was like, I've done 10K every day this week. I'm on like 90K now. We've been doing it obviously since the 1st of January. So, and people are like, that's not that far. And I'm like, when was the last time that you did 10K every single day for a week? Because I guarantee you the answer is never. So I said, and I said, I'm a very frank person. I will say exactly what I'm thinking at the time.
I'm exactly the same.
I don't ever sugarcoat anything. I said, well, tell you what then, put your shoes on tomorrow. I said, I'll come round yours and we'll go out for a run and let's see how hard this 10K is. Oh, well, I'm not doing that. I was like, it's not that easy then, is it? I said, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. I said, it's
so
not
relatable.
easy in the slightest.
So relatable with pole. When people don't know what I do and people see what I do, you have like clubs and stuff, they will have a pole in that. And if I see a pole, I will show off on it. And people will always be like, let's give that a go. Yeah. And they're thinking what I do is that easy. Yeah.
You've always been known to jump on a pole when there's been one in a club.
Oh, really? Are you one of those?
Yeah. Well, I'd rather forget about it, but the phones came out and I feel there is still footage out there of me as a 21-year-old loving a pole. Yeah. Back in the day.
I love that. I tend to avoid them because once you start showing off, then drunk people like to go on and try and do what you do, and it's a bit of a health hazard. But when people see what I do, they're like, oh, that's easy. And like you say, like going out for a 6-mile jog, and people are like, oh, it only takes so and so long. When people say that I do 6 or 7 minutes on a piece of apparatus, they're like, oh, it's only 6-7 minutes. Yeah, 6-7 minutes of holding my own body weight up and pulling and it's calisthenics the whole time I'm up on that piece of equipment. And that's what I said with New Year's. I was up that pole the whole time and come down, and obviously everyone's so impressed and like, oh, but I probably could do that though. And they're probably on the floor like, well, Jenny, I could so do pole dancing. And it's one of those things, like people don't appreciate the training and how much hard work goes into what you do as like a runner. You say like marathon runners and all of it, like it is hard work, and it's years of training it's taken me to be able to do what I do.
Yeah, it's the same with this podcasting thing. Like people always say to, oh, that must be easy. I'm like, why don't you do it then? If it's easy, why don't you do it? And they're like, well, I'm not really good at talking. I'm like, well, that ain't easy then, is it? I said, I've had to hone this craft. Like this I've been doing this just over a year. And the difference between when I first started and now is astronomical. Like, obviously we hadn't met until today. We had a 10-minute chat beforehand where, just to sort out the shows, what we're going to talk about and stuff and how it's all set up. But it's just natural to me now. Like, it was very weird hearing my voice back to start with. It was very weird seeing myself on camera and, YouTube and doing Instagram and all the rest of it. But even all of that sort of stuff now, I'm just so much more, like, because I'm so much more confident with talking and in front of the camera and all the rest of it now, it's like, right, the next thing I need to do is this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking about taking the podcast on tour around the UK. So we could potentially do this in person.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Afterwards, yeah, and I'll get up on I'll attempt to get up on a pole.
I could do like a little teach you like a couple of moves and see how you go.
A little bit, I mean? Definitely.
That'd be fun.
One below beginner session would be.
Oh yeah, no. There's like with men, you that teach different moves slightly because men are just always. Yeah, people hate when women say this, but men are slightly stronger in a different sense than women. And so when we get man on the pole, I will teach them a much different, like, I'll teach them more like static hold moves, where if I was teaching a woman as just in fun, in a sense, not like actual classes, but just like if I was in a club, I teach a woman like a spin down the pole and something like I wouldn't teach her like a flag, but I'd teach a man like a flag straight up, like if I was getting him straight up on the pole and see how we did with the flag.
See, I would have thought it would have been harder for a man because we're naturally bigger built, so it's harder to hold our weight up.
Yeah, you say that, but then because you're naturally bigger built, you've got. I don't know what it is. You just see them lift themselves. It's so much easier, and it's just like, okay, all right, okay. Whereas ladies, they're a little bit more. I think it's not that we don't have the strength, but we don't like to show it off as much. I think that's what it is. I just put it like that. We just don't like to show it off as much. They like to look dainty and lovely and, I just fly around the pole. And then when man's like, get on the pole, yeah. Which I don't mind. It's fine. We can stick to them stereotypes. It's cool. But like you were saying, with this sort of thing with when I first started teaching, I wasn't in a sense that I struggled with teaching because I struggled with being with new people and finding not so much conversation but being less awkward. And when you were young as well, I as a teenager, I was like, oh my gosh, all these new people, like you're always anxious and stuff. And I had to fully get over that. And now whenever I run my own classes, like, and I have new people come to class, I have to be like, hey ladies, how are you? Like, I have to be the over exaggerated excited one to make them feel comfortable. Otherwise, because everyone that's coming into class, everyone's automatically, because it's a new environment, they're going to be anxious. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, there's new people. We're about to go on a poll. They've all done it before. I've never done it. Like, so you have to be that person of like, it's okay. You'll be fine. If I was still, then they would be just as anxious as I would. You know what I mean? You have to be so excitable. But learning that ability over the time and learning that confidence, I think that's what makes people so standoffish with me now because I'm so in your face. I will be that person that'd be like, hi from across the road if I saw you, and I'm big and pink, so I stand out. And if you see me saying hi to you, you don't miss me.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, no, and I'm only small as well, but I'm still loud and very like, oh yes, like everything I wear is like bright and pink as well. So you see me from a while away.
With the sort of pole dance inside of it, what is the stigma that you get personally, or that the school gets with that?
Oh, I always get, so when I first started waitressing at my job, everyone assumed that I was a stripper, and everyone just stayed away from the conversation because they all just assumed that I worked in a strip club, which is very just putting me in a hole, like just putting me in that box. And once I started educating, I say, people about what I do, it's not that I don't respect what strippers do, or each to their own. Like I said, I teach a lot of strippers, but it's not my personal avenue of what I've done with what I do. I've obviously, my mum's pushed me down a certain avenue. It's whenever I have, it's men as well, always, they will always say, like when I was trying to date as well, when I wasn't with my partner, it was very difficult because whenever you bring up pole dancing, they always assume, like I say, stripper, and they always go bang straight to I'm a sleaze and all of that, which is very.
You can say the words. There's no thing.
Yeah, no, they always think I'm a slag and a slut, and they always go down bang that they put me into that rabbit hole, which is fine. But when you're trying to, I'm a performer. I'm not a stripper, and when I'm trying to sell myself to clubs and all of that, I have to say I'm a performer, and I get paid. Like people assume that I'm going to come on stage and not get paid and just get a couple of things thrown at me, which no, I have to have a room, I have to get paid, everything needs to be respectable. And I think pole dancers lose a lot of respect in that sense. And that's why the pole community have created their own pole comps and all of that, so then we can stay away from that sort of environment. However, because of all of the different stuff I do, I can avoid that in a sense. Like I can turn around to rave clubs and be like, oh, I'm an aerialist, I hang off a hoop. And then you will not get associated in any sense of the word as a stripper. And it's very sad because pole and then hoop are so similar. And there's even like apparatuses that like having both as lollipops. So you've got a pole and then a hoop at the top, which is what I do as well. And but then they won't associate that with pole dancing, but it's just the pole on its own, which is sad. And it's because of, like you say, the stigma that's built around it. But you can't ever, and you probably won't ever get away from that, because there's always going to be strippers, there's always going to be men paying for that sort of thing. But then you always, like I say, have to educate people's ears about what you do personally. But like I say, nothing against strippers. I have a lot of them that come to me for content, and I love what they do. I love going to strip clubs on a night out. They're probably one of the funnest places to go because it's just get titties in your face all night. It's lovely.
Yeah, see, for me, it's the complete opposite. I mean, I've been to strip clubs, obviously, not that many, probably two in my top, like 2 visits.
They're not as popular nowadays, which is sad. But if you are in the right area, you can find really good ones, and you will find very talented women in there.
For me, the problem is, why do I want to go somewhere that I'm going to end up going home on my own with a hard-on? That's my point of view on it.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why only certain people do go to those places.
Oh yeah, 100%. Obviously, it's big business. Like I'm not, again,
Massive.
no shade at them, like at all. They're doing what they're doing. They're doing what they're good at. That 100%, all the power to them. Just for me personally, I mean, I don't drink anyway, so it's very rare that I'm out and about, and I'm I'm not a loner. I've got mates and stuff like that. But a lot of what I do now, especially with the podcast and going out running and stuff, it's all solo stuff. Like there's no one else in my circle of friends that has the dream that I've got to be a professional podcaster. So there's no one that I can bounce any ideas off, or I can chat to anyone about it, because they're just like, are you still doing your podcast? Or how's the podcast going and stuff? And I'll tell them about it, but I can't be like, oh, I'm looking at new cameras and da-da-da, because they'll just switch off, because they're like, I'm not in that world. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Like, that's why I'm very close with my mum, because we run the school together, and we know what each other is talking about. So we talk a lot of business all the time. And whenever even some of my sisters that aren't really involved, because I've got 3 younger sisters, one of them that is in uni, you'll mention one thing to her, and she'll be like, oh, what are you on about? Like, it's a lot of lingo and a lot of, like, when you don't have someone else that knows what you're on about, it's difficult to talk about what you do, and then they don't really understand it, and like, say they're turn off, and so you just won't bother talking to them about it. And that's why I say I talk to my mum a lot, because we just know what each other's thinking a lot, because we're just so business minded, and we're constantly working on the next step for the business. And when with my friends, obviously they understand what I do, but they always laugh at me, because whenever I introduce myself, I'm like, professional pole dancer, and one of my mates, she's always like, oh, she's a professional pole dancer. Like, they all just like, don't make fun of me, but they make a laugh out of me, and I don't mind it. But that's why I tend to stay away from the conversation a lot, because yeah, it gets just too business heavy.
Obviously, we're coming up on time now for this episode, sadly. Would you like to join me for a second half? For a second episode?
Yeah, go for it.
Perfect. Do you want to give everyone your tags, your Instagram and all the rest of it, and then we'll shut this one down, and we'll get on for next week?
Fabulous. I'm the Pink Vixen, underscores in between like each of the words, and Marcie Detroit and a lot of things, if you're going to find me, because no one else has that name, funny enough. Marcie Detroit and the Pink Vixen.
Okay.
Pink.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Marcie, and we shall see you next week.